Grand Observer Thexis stood motionless before the Galactic Concordat's primary council, his four primary eyes fixed on the holographic display floating in the chamber's center. The data streams flowing through the projection told a story that made his crystalline exoskeleton vibrate with concern. "Honorable Council," he began, his translator converting his harmonic speech into the standard galactic frequency. "What you're seeing is not a simulation. This is real-time observation data from Sol 3, or as its inhabitants call it, Earth." The display showed multiple streams of combat footage, humans fighting in various terrains, adapting to impossible conditions, and most disturbingly, continuing to fight long past the point where any rational species would have surrendered. Senior Counselor Vexnar's tendrils writhed in distress. These creatures, they continue combat even with severed limbs. "Indeed," Vexis confirmed, advancing the display to show more footage. "But that's not what truly concerns us. Look at this." The hologram shifted to show historical records. This species evolved from persistence hunters. They didn't overpower their prey with superior strength or speed. They simply never stopped pursuing until their target collapsed from exhaustion. The council chamber filled with concerned murmurs as Thexis continued. "We've observed 17,000 sapient species since the Concordat's formation. None have displayed this combination of traits: extreme adaptability, unprecedented endurance, and most worryingly, an almost incomprehensible ability to derive pleasure from conflict." "Surely you exaggerate," interrupted Councillor Arix, her bioluminescent patterns flickering with skepticism. "No species could view conflict as pleasurable. It defies evolutionary logic." Thexis gestured, and the display showed humans engaging in recreational combat sports. "They call these games and sports. They deliberately engage in combat simulation for entertainment. Their young practice mock warfare before they can even speak. They have turned combat into an art form." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. These creatures didn't just survive conflict, they thrived on it. They had transformed the very thing that most species evolved to avoid into a cornerstone of their culture. "There's more," Thexis continued, his voice resonating with gravity. "Their information networks are saturated with combat scenarios. They spend significant resources creating simulated conflicts they call movies and games. They prepare for wars that haven't happened. They imagine threats that don't exist, then develop countermeasures for them." He paused, allowing the council to process this information. And perhaps most critically, they show no signs of losing this trait as they advance technologically. Most species become less aggressive as they develop. Humans, he projected a final set of data. Humans are channeling their combat drive into technological advancement. They've developed more weapons technology in the past century than most species do in a millennium. Senior Counselor Vexnar raised a tendril. "Your recommendation, Grand Observer?" "We have two options," Thexis replied. "Traditional containment protocols would suggest immediate isolation of their star system. However," he hesitated, his crystalline structure shifting colors with concern. "My analysis suggests that containment would only delay the inevitable. This species' drive to explore and expand appears to be as fundamental as their combat capabilities. They will break any quarantine we establish. It's not a question of if, but when." "The second option," Arix prompted. "We guide their development, carefully, controlled integration into the galactic community, but with unprecedented oversight. We've never attempted this before, but we've never encountered a species like this before." The council chamber erupted in discussion. Thexis stood silently, watching the humans' data continue to stream across the display. In all his centuries as Grand Observer, he'd never encountered a species that simultaneously fascinated and terrified him so completely. These humans were about to change everything. The only question was how. Senior Analyst Miraval moved through the simulation chamber aboard the observation vessel Eternal Vigil, her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with increasing distress as she reviewed the latest results. The massive quantum computer core had been running combat simulations for 3 standard cycles, and each new scenario painted a more alarming picture than the last. "Display Simulation Series 47 Beta," she commanded. The chamber filled with holographic projections of human combat scenarios. Her research team, composed of the Concordat's finest military analysts, watched in silence. "We've run this scenario 200 times," Miraval explained, her translator struggling to keep the tremor out of her voice. "In each iteration, we pit a standard Concordat peacekeeping force against human defenders. The humans are limited to their current technology level. We give our forces every possible advantage, superior numbers, better technology, complete surprise. And yet," she gestured, and the simulation played out. The holographic human forces, despite being drastically outgunned, employed tactics that defied conventional military logic. They turned their own civilian infrastructure into weapons. They used their planet's weather patterns against the invading forces. Most disturbingly, they showed no concern for their own survival when it meant achieving their objectives. 78% failure rate for our forces, reported sub-analyst Pren, his insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. And in the 22% of scenarios where we achieve initial victory, we face endless insurgency. They simply never stop fighting. Miraval moved to another display, but that's not the most concerning part. Show Adaptation Study 12. The chamber now displayed a series of human historical battles from ancient times to their modern era. Look at their technological progression. When faced with a superior opponent, most species either submit or flee. Humans, she paused, focusing the display on specific examples. Humans study their defeats. They learn, they adapt, then they come back stronger. "Impossible," muttered one of the analysts. "No species could advance from primitive projectile weapons to atomic fission in less than 2 centuries. "They did," Miraval confirmed, "and that's not even considering their theoretical weapons. We've intercepted their entertainment broadcasts, what they call science fiction. They actively imagine future weapons technologies, then work to make them real. They dream of war in ways no other species does." She brought up a new simulation. "We also tested scenarios where we gave them access to standard Concordat technology. The results were unprecedented. The simulation showed humans rapidly adapting and improving upon alien technology, often in ways the original designers never considered. Their problem-solving approach is unique," Kren noted. "They don't look for the most elegant solution. They look for what works, no matter how crude or unorthodox. And they share information at an alarming rate. One human's discovery becomes every human's advantage almost instantly." Miraval dimmed the displays and faced her team. "We need to prepare our report for Grand Observer Thexis, but I believe our conclusions are clear. Traditional containment protocols will fail. These humans," she struggled to find the right words, "they're not just another warrior species. They're something we've never encountered before." "What do you mean?" asked one of the junior analysts. "Most species fight for resources, territory, or survival," Miraval explained. "Humans fight for ideas, for principles. Sometimes it seems, just for the challenge itself. How do you contain a species that views obstacles as opportunities, that treats limitations as challenges to be overcome?" She activated her direct link to the Concordat Council. "This is Senior Analyst Miraval requesting immediate priority communication with Grand Observer Thexis. Classification: urgent. Subject: species assessment update. Recommendation for immediate protocol revision." As she waited for the connection, Miraval reviewed the simulation data one final time. The humans weren't just dangerous because of their combat capabilities. They were dangerous because they refused to accept limitations, including those imposed by species far more advanced than themselves. The galaxy was about to change, and the Concordat needed to adapt faster than it ever had before. After all, she thought with what humans would recognize as irony, adaptation is supposed to be our specialty. The Grand Council chamber of the Concordat had never been so tense. The crystalline walls, usually pulsing with gentle bioluminescence, now flickered erratically, reflecting the agitation of its occupants. 12 of the most powerful beings in the galaxy sat in growing discomfort as they reviewed Miraval's final assessment. Impossible, declared Supreme Councillor Zix Theta, their energy form crackling with disbelief. No species can maintain this level of combat effectiveness across all technological stages. There must be an error in the simulations. Grand Observer Thexis interfaced directly with the chamber's holographic systems, bringing up new data streams. There is no error, Supreme Councillor. Observe this incident from their second global conflict. The chamber filled with images of human soldiers scaling sheer cliffs under heavy fire at a place called Point du Hoc. Several council members recoiled as they watched the humans continue climbing despite casualties, despite impossible odds. This is not an isolated incident, Thexis continued. Humans regularly attempt what they themselves classify as impossible tasks. More disturbing still, they often succeed. Senior Analyst Miraval stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing with urgency. We've discovered something even more concerning. Humans don't just fight, they innovate during combat. Every conflict makes them stronger. They call it necessity is the mother of invention. The chamber's atmospheric processors struggled to keep up with the increased respiratory output of the assembled council members. Councillor Arik's tentacles coiled tightly as she spoke. What of psychological warfare? Surely we can convince them to. That approach would likely backfire. Miraval interrupted, displaying new data. Humans respond to threats by becoming more aggressive. They unite against external pressure. More importantly, they tell stories about it. Stories. Zix Theta's energy form fluctuated in confusion. They create narratives about overcoming superior forces. Their entertainment is filled with tales of smaller, technologically inferior groups defeating powerful opponents. They don't just imagine victory, they expect it. The council chamber fell silent as security footage began playing. Humans in primitive protective gear running toward danger to save others. Humans lifting impossibly heavy objects to rescue trapped individuals. Humans diving into hazardous environments without hesitation. This is their response to emergency situations, Thexis explained. No risk assessment, no calculation of personal cost. They simply act. And perhaps most remarkably, they celebrate such behavior. They award medals for it. They teach their young to emulate it. Supreme Councillor Zix Theta's energy form dimmed slightly. Your recommendation, then? Miraval and Thexis exchanged glances before Thexis spoke. Standard quarantine protocols would be insufficient. This species will achieve interstellar travel within decades. When they do, they will not be contained by any barrier we create. They will view it as a challenge to overcome. Then we must take more direct action, suggested one of the younger council members. Preventive measures. No. Miraval's voice cut through the chamber. Direct confrontation would be catastrophic. Our simulations show that any aggressive action against humans would only accelerate their military development. They have a saying, "What doesn't kill me makes me stronger." They mean it literally. Then what options remain? Zix Theta demanded. Thexis activated a new holographic display showing a complex network of satellites and monitoring stations. We implement a modified quarantine, not to contain them, but to contain knowledge of them. We create a buffer zone around their system, not to keep them in, but to keep others out. We give them time. Time for what? Asked Councillor Arix. Time to mature as a species, Miraval explained. Time to channel their combat drive into other pursuits. They're already showing signs of this. Their space program began as a military competition, but evolved into scientific exploration. Their most warlike nations are becoming diplomatic powers. And if they discover the quarantine? Zix Theta's energy form pulsed with concern. They will, Thexis stated simply. The question is not if, but when. And when they do, we must be ready to offer them something more interesting than conflict. More interesting than conflict. To a warrior species. Aric's tentacles writhed in disbelief. Yes, Miraval said, her bioluminescence brightening with conviction. We offer them the greatest challenge of all, peace. But not just any peace. We offer them the chance to become the guardians of galactic stability. We turn their warrior nature into an asset. The council chamber erupted in discussion, but the decision was already taking shape. The humans would be quarantined, but not forever. The galaxy would need them eventually. They just had to survive long enough to be ready for that responsibility. As the council members argued about implementation details, Thexis and Miraval shared a knowing look. The humans had a saying that seemed particularly apt. The best way to predict the future is to create it. The galaxy's future was about to be created, whether it was ready or not. Emergency alerts cascaded through the Eternal Vigil's command center as First Commander Ren Tak stared in disbelief at the sensor readings. A human vessel, primitive by Concordat standards, but remarkably advanced for their supposed technological level, had just passed the outer marker of the quarantine zone. The impossible had happened decades ahead of schedule. Status report, she demanded, her crystalline form shifting through shades of alarm. Human vessel designation Odyssey has breached containment grid Sector 7, reported Operations Officer Kelvin, their neural networks pulsing with anxiety. They're approaching one of our automated warning beacons. Time to contact, 6 minutes. Ren Tak activated the emergency protocol channel. This is First Commander Ren Tak requesting immediate connection to Grand Observer Thexis. Priority override, containment breach. The response was instantaneous. Thexis's holographic form materialized in the command center, his expression grave. Report. The humans have developed an experimental propulsion system we didn't predict. Some kind of fusion-powered plasma drive. They're about to make first contact with our warning infrastructure. Impossible, Thexis muttered, but the data streams didn't lie. How did we miss this development? They kept it secret, Kelvin interjected, displaying archived transmissions. The project was hidden under layers of misdirection. They called it a black project. Most of their own species doesn't even know it exists. Ren Tak watched as the human ship drew closer to the beacon. Orders, sir. Thexis's holographic form flickered as he processed the implications. We knew this day would come, but not so soon. Not like this. Show me their vessel's specifications. The data appeared. The Odyssey was a triumph of human ingenuity. They had somehow combined multiple theoretical technologies into a working spacecraft, breaking several laws of physics that the Concordat had considered immutable. The ship's design showed signs of being ready for combat, despite being classified as an exploration vessel. Of course, Thexis said, almost appreciatively. They built their first interstellar ship to be combat-capable, not because they expect war, but because they always prepare for it. Sir, Kelvin interrupted, they're scanning the beacon. Their sensor technology is unusual. They're using methods we didn't think possible at their development stage. The command center fell silent as they watched the human ship carefully maneuver closer to the beacon. Their approach wasn't cautious or fearful, it was methodical, professional, like they had trained for this exact scenario. They're hailing the beacon, Kelvin reported. The message, it's being broadcast in multiple formats, including some we've never seen. They're attempting to communicate in ways we hadn't even considered. Thexis's holographic form brightened slightly. They're exceeding every limitation we thought they had. Classic human behavior. We need to make a decision now. We could activate the beacon's defensive systems, Ren Tak suggested, though her tone indicated she already knew the response. No, Thexis said firmly. That would be the worst possible first contact scenario. These humans, they've already demonstrated more capability than we predicted. If we appear hostile, they'll respond in kind. And based on our research, that's not a confrontation we want. Sir, Kelvin's neural patterns surged with urgency. They're beginning to decrypt the beacon's automatic warning messages. Their computation speed is unprecedented. They've already broken through 3 layers of encryption that were supposed to be impossible at their tech level. Rentak watched as new data poured in. The humans weren't just examining the beacon, they were learning from it. Every scan, every decoded message, every moment of observation was making them stronger, more knowledgeable. "Grand Observer," she said, "we need to make a decision. They'll have full access to the beacon's data core in less than 30 minutes at this rate." Thexis was quiet for a moment, his holographic form shifting through various spectral patterns as he thought. Finally, he spoke, "Initiate First Contact Protocol Omega-7, but modify it. Don't present ourselves as superior beings coming to welcome them to the galactic community. Present ourselves as equals who have been waiting to meet them." Equals. Rentak's crystalline form flickered with surprise. But their technology is not what makes them dangerous or valuable, Thexis interrupted. Their potential is, their drive, their relentless innovation. We're not making first contact with what they are now, we're making first contact with what they're about to become. The command center burst into activity as the new orders were implemented. As Rentak watched the human ship continue its methodical investigation of the beacon, she couldn't help but wonder if this was how the galaxy's next great change would begin. Not with careful planning, but with humanity once again refusing to be contained by anyone's expectations. The conference room aboard the Concordat diplomatic vessel, Stellar Accord, hummed with tension. Captain Sarah Chen of the Odyssey sat across from Grand Observer Thexis, her expression unreadable as she reviewed the historical data about humanity's quarantine. Behind her, her crew maintained equally disciplined expressions, though their body language betrayed their growing excitement rather than the anger the Concordat representatives had expected. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Chen said, setting down the data tablet. "You've been watching us for decades, determined we were too dangerous to approach, and set up an entire quarantine network to contain us until we matured as a species." "That is correct," Thexis replied, his crystalline form shifting nervously. "We anticipated this revelation would cause significant distress." A sound interrupted him, something no Concordat protocol had prepared him for. Captain Chen was laughing. Not the aggressive, challenging laugh their xenopsychologists had predicted, but genuine amusement tinged with what could only be described as pride. "Of course we found your beacon ahead of schedule," she said, grinning. "You gave us a puzzle box and expected us to just stare at it. The moment we detected those energy signatures, every scientist and engineer on Earth started working on ways to reach it." Commander Rodriguez, the Odyssey's chief engineer, stepped forward. "The plasma drive. We developed it specifically because our long-range scans suggested your quarantine grid would be vulnerable to its signature. We didn't know what we were breaking into, but we knew something was out there trying to keep us in." Miraval, who had joined the diplomatic team, found her bioluminescent patterns pulsing with confusion. "You're not angry about the containment attempt." "Angry?" Chen raised an eyebrow. "Do you know what happened when our first probes detected your quarantine grid? Global cooperation increased by 300%. Every major nation pooled resources. The challenge of breaking out of an alien quarantine united humanity more effectively than any peace treaty ever could." Thexis and Miraval exchanged glances. Once again, humans had defied their predictions. Instead of reacting with hostility to their containment, they had turned it into a motivation for advancement. "There's something else you should know," Rodriguez added, activating a holographic display of his own. "We didn't just break through your quarantine, we improved it. Here," he pointed to several sections of the containment grid, "and here, your energy distribution was inefficient. We figured out how to increase its effectiveness by 47% using principles we developed while trying to breach it." The Concordat representatives stared in stunned silence. The humans had not only overcome their containment technology, but had already started innovating upon it. "Captain," Thexis said carefully, "You should understand that the quarantine was implemented out of concern for galactic stability. Your species' combination of traits, your adaptability, your combat prowess, your drive to overcome challenges. Made you nervous?" Chen smiled. "It should, but not for the reasons you think." She stood, walking to the viewport that showed both ships floating in the vastness of space. "We're not angry about being quarantined because we understand your reasoning. We've quarantined ourselves plenty of times when we discovered something potentially dangerous. The difference," Rodriguez continued, "is that we never expect the quarantine to be permanent. It's always been a temporary measure while we figure out how to solve the problem." "And now?" Miraval asked, genuinely curious. "Now," Chen turned back to face them, "you have a choice. You can try to maintain a quarantine that we've already proven won't hold us, or you can accept that humanity isn't just going to sit quietly in its corner of the galaxy. We're coming out to play. The only question is whether we do that as partners or competitors." Thexis felt his crystalline structure vibrate with what humans would recognize as nervous laughter. "You're offering us terms." "Of course," Chen replied. "You've been watching us long enough to know that humanity does its best work when faced with a challenge. You wanted us to mature as a species. Well, what bigger challenge is there than helping maintain peace across an entire galaxy?" As the implications of her words sank in, Thexis realized that the Concordat's greatest fear about humanity had just become its greatest hope. They hadn't contained humanity. They had given them time to prepare for a role no one had anticipated, not as threats to galactic peace, but as its most determined defenders. After all, Shen added with a knowing smile, if there's one thing humans love more than overcoming a challenge, it's proving people wrong about what we're capable of. The Grand Council chamber of the Concordat had never hosted a species making their first appearance in the galactic community. Yet here stood Captain Sarah Chen and her crew, their very presence rewriting centuries of protocol. The chamber's crystalline walls pulsed with patterns that reflected the mixed anxiety and curiosity of its occupants. Supreme Counselor Zix Theta's energy forms stabilized as they addressed the assembly. "The human delegation has made an unusual proposal regarding their species' role in galactic society. Captain Chen, please explain to the full council what you suggested." Chen stepped forward, her confident stance drawing attention from every alien species present. "Distinguished members of the Concordat, you tried to quarantine humanity because you saw us as a potential threat. We're here to suggest that you were looking at it backward. You don't need to protect the galaxy from humanity. You need humanity to protect the galaxy." Murmurs rippled through the chamber as Chen activated a holographic display showing various human peacekeeping operations throughout Earth's history. These are instances where human military forces were deployed not for conquest, but for protection, peacekeeping, disaster response, humanitarian aid. Yes, we're warriors, but we're at our best when we're fighting for something, not against something. Commander Rodriguez added technical data to the display. "We've already demonstrated our ability to improve upon Concordat technology. Imagine that innovative drive focused on defensive systems, on emergency response protocols, on making the galaxy safer rather than just maintaining the status quo." Miraval's bioluminescence pulsed with realization as she addressed the council. "The humans are correct. Our simulations focused on their potential for disruption, but we never fully explored their potential for protection. Their unique combination of traits, their adaptability, their drive to overcome challenges, their ability to unite against external threats, these could be invaluable assets." "More than that," Thexis interjected, his crystalline form gleaming with newfound understanding. "They've already proven their capability. The quarantine network we created, humans didn't just break through it, they improved it. They turned a containment system into a defense grid. That's what they do. They don't just solve problems, they transform them into opportunities." Chen nodded. "Earth has dozens of different military forces, all trained in different environments, different tactics, different approaches to problem solving. We've spent centuries learning how to fight in every conceivable condition. But more importantly, we've spent those same centuries learning when not to fight and how to protect those who can't protect themselves. The chamber fell silent as she continued. You were right to be cautious about humanity joining the galactic community. We are dangerous. We are unpredictable. We do break rules and push boundaries. But those same traits that make us dangerous can make us the greatest allies you've ever had. Supreme Counselor Zix Theta's energy form brightened. And what would humanity want in return? Chen smiled. What we've always wanted: challenges to overcome, problems to solve, new frontiers to explore. Give us that, and you'll see what humanity can really do. The council chamber erupted in discussion, but the outcome was already becoming clear. The quarantine that had been meant to contain humanity would instead become the foundation of a new galactic defense network, with human ingenuity at its core. As the formal procedures began for integrating humanity into the Concordat, Vexus approached Chen privately. You knew, didn't you? From the moment you found our beacon, you knew this would be the outcome. Not exactly, Chen replied, but we knew it was a possibility. Humanity has a long history of turning obstacles into opportunities. You tried to contain us, and instead, you gave us exactly what we needed, a reason to push ourselves further, to prove ourselves worthy of something greater. And now? Vexus asked. Chen looked out at the assembled representatives of 1,000 worlds, all coming to terms with the fact that their newest members were about to change everything. Now we do what humans have always done. We adapt, we innovate, and we protect what matters. You wanted us to mature as a species. Well, nothing makes you grow up faster than being given responsibility for others. As the formal integration ceremonies began, Vexus couldn't help but appreciate the irony. The Concordat had tried to quarantine humanity to protect the galaxy, only to discover that humanity's warrior nature was exactly what the galaxy needed. They hadn't contained humanity, they had simply given them time to prepare for their true purpose. The age of human quarantine was over. The age of human guardianship was about to begin.